Former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, one of several in the first Trump administration, joins me now. He's also a CBS News foreign policy and national security contributor. H.R., always great to see you. I want to play you some sound from the president today because it left me a little bit perplexed. It's about what he believes President Putin of Russia has agreed to regarding security guarantees for Ukraine. Let's play that sound.
President Putin agreed that Russia would accept security guarantees for Ukraine, and this is one of the key points that we need to consider, and we're going to be considering that at the table also, like who will do what, essentially.
HR, why I'm perplexed by that is because officials in Moscow today denounced any conversation at all about British forces in Ukraine or European forces in Ukraine, calling it flat out provocative and a sure way to continue the war. I can't put those two things together.
Well, I think what you have is a case of President Trump trying to get Russia to agree to this, because he knows that this is what Volodymyr Zelenskyy needs, right? President Zelenskyy needs security guarantees because the objective for the Ukrainian leadership, I think for Europe, for us, ought to be a free, sovereign Ukraine that is capable of defending itself in perpetuity to prevent any further Russian aggression, and is on a path to reconstruction, right, and regaining the lives of so many people who have been so many families have been affected in such a profound way. So it's important also to remember, Major, we had troops in Ukraine, we had advisors in Ukraine, we had ships in the Black Sea, and the Biden administration pulled them back in an effort to allay Putin's security concerns and a belief that maybe that was a way to prevent the war. But of course, what that revealed is that what provokes Putin is the perception of weakness. It turned out to be kind of a green light for the war. So this is not unprecedented for us to have advisors, for example, in Ukraine, and to have a much more considerable military presence in the Black Sea region.
Do you believe President Trump would be willing to send U.S. forces into Ukraine as part of this security guarantor force, either on the line of demarcation or very near to it, to buttress European forces?
I think it's possible. I think President Trump, if anything, demonstrates a degree of flexibility in these issues. I think, what Putin right now should realize is he came out of the Alaska meeting looking pretty good, right, in terms of what he wanted to achieve, because he thought what he had gotten President Trump to agree to is a peace agreement that was unacceptable to Ukraine and unacceptable to Europeans. Because what Putin wants to do, not only to subsume Ukraine, but to fold that into a broader effort to recreate the Russian Empire, and to do that by weakening the transatlantic relationship, splintering NATO. And what you see today, and give credit to President Trump and the European leaders, is you see a degree of unity here. And as you said at the top of the segment, this message of U.S. and Europe being together, that's got to be a little bit disquieting to Vladimir Putin, who, by the way, Major, is in a position of profound weakness. So when Chancellor Merz today said, hey, how about putting some pressure on Russia? I think he's got a really good point, because Putin is trying to appear strong. He doesn't want a ceasefire because he's trying to make even modest territorial gains on the front in Ukraine to appear as if he's strong. But his forces are taking, in my view, unsustainable losses, and he has very severe economic and financial difficulties.
And very quickly, HR, to that point raised by Chancellor Merz of Germany, there should be no trilateral meeting without a ceasefire that's enforceable. Agree?
Yeah, I think that should be the goal. Now, what President Trump is trying to do is demonstrate some flexibility to see how this plays out. But I think a path to a ceasefire is more pressure on Putin, because, hey, my theory here, and this is what's really important, Major, is I think you have to make an assumption about what is driving and constraining Vladimir Putin. It's not his security concerns. It's not what he calls as these root causes, to denazify a country that is led by a Jew, who was no threat to him at all. It's really important for us to recognize that what motivates Putin is this desire to reestablish the empire. And you know what? When he will stop is when he believes that he can no longer continue this war of aggression at an acceptable cost and risk to him. And so, in other words, Putin won't stop until he is stopped. You have to remember, I mean, he poisoned a presidential candidate in 2004, waged a sustained campaign of subversion all the way up to the first invasion of Ukraine in 2014. So it's important also to remember this is an 11-year war at this stage. And so he's not going to stop, I believe, until he is stopped. But the good news is he's in a position of weakness. The good news is President Trump and European leaders are showing unity when Putin's best hope was for division.
H.R. McMaster, always a pleasure, sir. Thanks so much for your time.